Sleep, very seldom lie down. It's very difficult for an elephant to lie down. The weight of an elephant is very difficult to bear, and its internal organs and to lie in. But lying on their side that is a possibility, especially against very large termite mounds, or in the mud where there is a depression, or in soft sand, or especially when they're in the water, and the water can take up a lot of the weight with the buoyancy. But as adults know, see, the other thing about that is that elephants don't really sleep for long periods of time. A lot of people seem to be under the impression that animals sleep like us humans, that come nightfall, it's time to go to sleep. It doesn't really work that way. Elephants are pretty much awake all night, all 24 hours. They do rest, especially in the heat of the day they will rest. And you often find the adults standing in the shade with their heads relaxed, their trunks relaxed, their eyes perhaps even closed, and the youngsters fast asleep at their feet, and there's always going to be one of them that will be touching one of the youngsters with a foot to make sure that they know where they are, so that they don't get trod on. You see, now as soon as we're approaching, she turns around to see what we're up to, and that's the point where I need to stop. And it's interesting because now we can actually watch this feeding, and I can pick up one of these branches and show you some interesting stuff, some neat stuff. So as she's picking these branches, she twirls them around in her mouth, chewing all the bark off and then discarding the branch. And over time, over years and years and years, instead of these trees becoming trees, they stayed the low bushes. They're almost farmed by the elephant as these low bushes that constantly recoppice with these thin branches or thin stems that are ideal. And the more elephants feed on them, the more they're going to recoppice branches. But they've grown considerably since we first started looking at them so many months ago in December. And now finally we have a herd of elephants feeding amongst them. And this herd would probably come back to the same patch of teak every year over different periods of time to harvest these teak branches. This is a plant known as the roundleaf teak. And well, it doesn't really grow into big trees here, but in places where now here in the Sabi sand we have this roundleaf teak that they utilize quite extensively. It's quite a dominant tree species in places where elephants do this. And further north from here, where this roundleaf teak starts fading, we get another plant, another tree called the mapani tree, that the elephants do almost an identical thing with them. They constantly harvesting them, constantly recoppicing, what I call farming, constantly farming with this roundleaf, or rather the mapani up there, roundleaf teak over here. Further north, when the mapani starts fading away, when you start going north into East Africa, there are different trees there that they will utilize in much the same way, mostly only to get to those thin branches and to get to the bark from the base to where the first leaves start forming. But the other interesting thing is that it allows them time to, or rather the calves, to wander freely amongst the thicket, and that's what we've actually had here. We've been able to hear these very loud footprints because these calves would stomp at the same time. So while she's chewing the bark off of one stem, she's actually picking the next, so it's almost like a constant supply of bark. As she finishes that one, she lets it drop, and the next one goes in the mouth. See if I can move a little forward so we can see that better. She might accept us moving a bit forward now. Action of an elephant starting the engine is a good way of knowing whether they're comfortable or not. Let's see that she's going to react. It's interesting feeding behavior. And so far she's quite comfortable with it. So before she reacts, I want to stop. We get a fairly good view from here, and so that tells me she's quite comfortable with us, even a little bit closer after the first encounter. Something spooked her. Sorry, I just need to talk on the radio or listen to it. Text incoming. Confirm you got what Umkonzo you got up there. Okay, copied. I did hear that maybe there was Madats on Buffelshoek this morning. Okay, copied. So anyway, sorry, as I was saying, she suddenly got very spooked for some reason. I can't tell you what it was. Possibly because her matriarch was moving away. She's not a very young cow. She's even lactating, this female that was with us. But something just suddenly put a bee in her bonnet, and she ran up to her mother. This gives me a chance to pick up one of these branches that she's been feeding on, so that I can show you what I mean by the way they feed. Sorry. So this is a very, very fresh, and this is why this is where we learn a lot about our environment from a very young age. Animals do things, and then going to where they were and being able to investigate after they've been there. So this is a way that I have learnt over time how fresh branches are after elephant have been feeding on it. This is still very, very wet. You can see where she's chewed the bark off from where she's picked it at the base. She's twisted it and chewed all the bark off, usually to the first leaf, which is here where my finger is now. And where she's chewed the bark off is still very, very wet. And if you were to sort of hold on to this, you can see how it would dry over time. Are still very moist and soft, and if I do this with my hand, it comes away. It's a little bit of mucus, it's a little bit of wet from the and from the elephant chewing. So I know that there was an elephant chewing this branch just recently, within minutes. Well, they're moving off into some rather thick bush, so we're going to move on and see what else we can find. I think we'll head up onto, I want to go up onto Buffelshoek Cutline and see if we can find any tracks. Find a place to turn around, or we could just carry on this road. We can do that too. I'm going to need to call this over the radio, so excuse me for a minute. Station leaving Columbia Grove, Nyala Road Junction, just south of Buffelshoek Dam. Leaving open lock. Kind of down feathers. This comes from Ohio, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, I think the other one comes from Ohio. I can't remember where this one came from. Suddenly but it beats hitting myself in the face all the time. A few flies on me today. I found a flower, a Sunday flower for the ladies, on the floor, I mean on the ground, to the left. Just trying to see what the best bet is to, I think from about this angle, Brian. If I turn a little bit any closer, and we're not going to see it. It's a very pretty flower. That's the flower of the bushman's candle, or baboon's tail plant. It's a plant that is the old leaf bases that form like a bark around it that are fire retardant, fire repellent, or fire proof to some degree. I wonder if I can find an old piece. Let me see if I can find you an old piece so I can explain it to you better. There's some plants just here on my right. Maybe you can Pastor, can you on this one?
Yeah.
So I found bits of that fiber. You can see the actually quite old, and every year new leaves come out from these very fibrous bases, and then of course luckily we've managed to find a flower, which is probably a result of this recent rain. But here I've managed to, from an old one, I've managed to collect a few of this fibrous material from an old stem that obviously had been trodden on and was lying flat. Now this outer part becomes quite fire retardant, and it is believed that bushmen are able to carry hot coals to a amount of time, hence the name. One of the reasons why it's called a bushman's candle. The other thing is that they would take these and dip them in animal wax and use them as a torch, to use them as a candle. But they're also known as baboon's tail. They supposedly look like baboon's tails. But it will be. This cloud will move over and we'll get a lovely sunset, I'm sure. I hope. Just trying to think, there was a question from Paul that I think I nearly missed, asking about cheetah. Cheetah wanting to know if cheetah occur here. Yes, they do, Paul. They are endangered, they are rather threatened in terms of their numbers. But as you can see, this habitat that we're driving through now, which is pretty uniform, kind of habitat, you might find cheetah moving through an area from one place to another. A lot of this bushman's candle or baboon's tail around us, and a lot of them are. Might even find a patch with a few more flowers on it. But they're quite far off in the road. A xerophyte is a ground-dwelling plant, spelt with an X, not a Z. Bula Ray wants to know if these are flowering all year round. Blooming earlier. butterfly. Well, the one of the species flowers any time of the year, especially after fires, and January to April for this one. I think this is the one that this is the right one. That's why I've seen it flower at different times of the year. This particular species is Retinervus, and not really lilies. They're not lily family. They belong to their own family, actually, known as the Tecophiliaceae. And I guess it's the rain that's prompted them to flower. Some of them pale, some of them quite mauve and lilac. Oh. Pretty, very pretty flowers. I don't know how many more flowers I'll be able to find you. I was hoping there were going to be a lot more flowers after this recent rain. And that's at least one of them. So sometimes when I look at flowers, I don't really register what time of the year it is, but I do remember seeing these flowering earlier in the year, earlier in the summer season. So I wanted to see if the book mentioned anything about specific flowering periods. One of its cousins, another type of xerophyta, only flowers January to April, which is, I guess, late summer, end of summer. Might be worth keeping an eye out. We're back at Guaripan. We were here a little bit earlier. We came this way looking for elephants because we picked up their tracks. I've done a fairly big loop all the way to Bubblesook Dam and back to here. And what I want to do now is I want to go up onto Cheetah Cut Line, which is our eastern boundary, to see if, and then head to our northern boundary to see if we can find any signs of a cat that was here this morning. Stefan and I got here, we were tracking Karula, and he got out to walk up this way to see if her tracks were here. I went to walk the other way, and as he got to about where we are here now, right this very spot, one of the landowners pulled in to talk to us, and Karula was sitting on the road. She just glanced at us and carried on looking at something she was looking at, and then she proceeded to head into this bush, and it looked like she was after something. She did disturb some kudu. We heard the kudu barking after Scott got here. Scott and Andrew came in to see them. Now, that was our sunrise safari. This is our sunset safari. We are live, in case you're just joining us from wherever you may be on the planet. Welcome to Djuma Game Reserve. Welcome to our live drive. My name is Mark. Cameraman at the back is Brian. Is Abe Brian. And with our camera assistant, who's a superhero today, just in case we need some super thumb strength. Nikki is in our final control room, and she sends questions to me, or comments, answers sometimes. I need to find you all a bird that you can identify so that you can send in answers, and that you can send to #SafariLive if you want to send it as a tweet, or you can send it to our email, which is questions@WildEarthTV. Now, being on this road, and then the next road when we turn 90 degrees and start heading west. It's going to be important for me to be able to try and find any signs of this leopard, the Queen of Djuma, who might have come out onto this road. If she hasn't, then it's possibly the other road, and if she hasn't come out there, then we might have to loop back to Buffelshoek Dam to see if we can find her somewhere around there. And sometime just after our sunset, I'm hoping we're going to have a very pretty sunset for the sunset drive. We're going to be sitting around a fire in the middle of nowhere, in the open, and having a chat around the fire. And our fireside chat starts shortly after our drive this evening. We have a short break. We're going to need to just have a short break at the end of drive, just to set up all the equipment, and then we'll be live. Brent and myself, I think, at first. There's good rain. You can actually see the rain coming out of that cloud. Just getting back to Paul's question, Paul from Palm Springs. While they are quite rare and there are cheetah in the area, we do occasionally, and we are lucky enough to maybe get to see them from time to time. We've unfortunately only had one really good sighting of cheetah of late, and the last I heard of cheetah was 2 cheetah way to the east of us along the boundary with the Kruger National Park. It sounds like a physical boundary. It's not. It's not a boundary that of the greater Kruger National Park being the Sabi Sand Game Reserve, and then the actual public or national park part of the Kruger to the east of us. And they must have gone, or probably went into Kruger after that. But at any moment, we could find cheetah tracks, we could find cheetah walking down the road. It's a matter of luck. As much as it is, there's a dove in the road. So far nothing crossing back to the east in terms of our leopard. Not yet at any rate. Maybe we should try fire break. Yup, in the Netherlands is asking about lion. Yup, nice to hear from you in the Netherlands. Wanting to know at what age do lion bring their cubs back to the pride? Probably around 6 weeks old, maybe even earlier. There's no fixed number because some prides Depends on so many different things. Sometimes without other youngsters, if they're the only youngsters, they might come back earlier. If there are other youngsters that are slightly older, they might spend it. But generally anyway, from say 3. Of this terrain, very difficult to actually find tracks. I just have to go back up onto the road, the main road. Regina wants to know why Shangaan names are used on the radio, Shangaan names of animals. It's just tradition, Regina. That for many, many years in the past, we didn't have earpieces. 20, 30 years ago, we just had these blaring radios that every work Shangaan names are used on the radio, Shangaan names of animals. It's just tradition, Regina. That for many, many years in the past, we didn't have earpieces. 20, 30 years ago, we just had these blaring radios that enjoyment. Northern boundary. Just heard Franklin. In fact, here they are, coming out onto the road now, running this way. And so something that startled them all further north of us, and I'm not going to be able to find out. But what I'm going to try and do is head up the road to see if I can see any tracks the way these francolins are moving. Crested francolin. Seems to be something preventing the car from starting at the moment, so we're just going to sit for a minute. I'm going to let it stand for a sec. We can look at the sky. I'm not in a good position to see a great sky from here, but we'll also sit and listen. Oh, they've gone. Maybe something's coming out on this road. We'll have to wait and see. about giraffe. Giraffe not plentiful because of the vegetation. Sometimes, in terms of the size of Djuma, the size of the Sabi Sands and the size of the Kruger National Park. Now, this map is only this light green patch that you can see here is all the Sabi Sands. This big blue line here coming down the middle is the sand road. Now, this whole area is probably about 150,000 acres, probably around 60,000 hectares in terms of the size of the Sabi Sand. Now, if we have a look, I'm going to fold it in half because it's going to make things easier. Remember, we're losing the bottom half of the Sabi Sand, so we're now going to be looking just at the top northern part of the Sabi Sand. And what we have here is just this little bit of ground here, basically the size of 2 postage stamps, which is Djuma. Now, the Sabi Sand is part of the Greater Kruger National Park, which runs all the way up the north on the eastern side of the Sabi Sand, all this dark green coming down the edge, and all the way down south. And that is millions and millions of acres. So there are hundreds of giraffe in the Greater Kruger National Park that do come into the Sabi Sands, but it's a matter of whether they're going to be spending any time here, because the movement of animals like elephants and zebra and to some degree wildebeest, lion to some degree, especially cheetah, a lot of animals that we only see fleeting glimpses of, it's because they don't have territories, they don't have very specific areas that they live in all year round. They will move. There will be giraffe that one day they'll be in Kruger, and then a week later they can be here in Djuma, and another week later they can be in this part of the Sabi Sands. And they move around vast areas covering different feeding grounds. So one of the reasons why we don't have any, we don't know of any giraffe here, is because we are just this tiny little area in such a massive area. I mean, we are 1,000 acres, or rather 2,000 acres of this 150,000 acre private reserve, which is part of and open to this 7 million acres of the Greater Kruger National Park. So the chances of having a giraffe here are always good, and that is why when we do have giraffe or elephant or any of the animals that we see here, why it is so wonderful to have them. This other animals on a regular basis is because they live, they're territorial, and they live on Djuma. They don't actually leave their territories. Giraffe are not like that. So one of the reasons why giraffe are seen only occasionally, and why it would appear there are not a lot of giraffe, but in actual fact there are quite a few giraffe. It's just that they don't sit still. Let's see if we're going to have any luck out of this machine. Right, there we go. Just a hiccup. Having come onto the boundary, I want to go back a little bit to that road where the Franklins came from. I think it's a road. I'm not seeing anything here though. It is a little track, but there's no more alarming. Sometimes we will never know. Sometimes things happen and we will never find the answers to them when things are alarming, giving off alarm calls or in town. our northern boundary. We're heading west, as you can see, the lovely pink glow to the sky in the west, and I'm sure this is going to prove to be a really beautiful sunset. Just to do some double checking. They get into difficult situations with hunting. It's no good. It's not a really good environment for little ones to be around until their eyes are open, until for the first few weeks of their life, until they can see better and until they can move around better and until they're familiar with their surroundings. And even though sometimes they are with the pride, they're often, oh my gosh, look at this lily. Middle of this season, from that little bit of rain. At the camera, you've got to see this beautiful color. Special gift. That's for my mom and dad's birthday. My dad was yesterday. My mom was last week. Beautiful. Bulbospermum. This one. And crinum, it comes from the Greek word for a lily, and bulbospermum. When you see the seeds of these crinums, they're fleshy balloon type seed pods, and that maybe we'll get to see those. I must remember where they are. We'll get to see those, and they like these. They almost look like a bulb, like a bulb that you would plant. Big round bulbs with a really strange type of seed, because the seed itself is like a bulb. Oh, the sun is setting. I wish we could get to see that. Maybe we can on this road into Buffelshoek Dam. Color of a note in the sky. Maybe we'll just have to try and get to the top of the next ridge. We won't see it from down here. Roller coaster. Whee! we could get to see it. This is an east-west road, and the sun, having moved back into the northern hemisphere, has crossed the Rubicon. It is now west, rather north of our westernmost point. But there we get to see a little bit of that fire. That's why we call it Sunset Drive. The sun just hitting the front of the top of the escarpment as it sets. This last weekend of April, can you believe it? 2015. And now I'm pretty sure from the fire of the sunset, I'm sure there's also another little fire starting to brew, and that is around the fireplace where I'm going to be heading shortly. We're going to be going into a fireside chat from this fiery sunset. We'll drive around a little bit more and then end up around a fire. Thank you, Brian. Beautiful. However, I still wanted to go back past Buffalo's Dam just to have a look, just in case, because I haven't really seen any tracks from our Queen of Djuma, and we're not too far from Buffalo's Dam as yet. Marge in California is asking if lions sleep in trees. Yes, they do, Marge, in some places. I can't say that I've seen lions sleeping in trees here. They do climb occasionally, especially as youngsters. The only place that I've really seen, and even then it's not all lion. Remember, this is now once again a behavioral trait, that something that some cats will pick up and others won't. So it's not something that, if I answer yes, that doesn't mean that all lions sleep in trees, because unfortunately the depends clause comes into it, and it depends on the lion, and it depends on the area, and well, mostly it depends on the lions themselves. But I lived with a pride of lion in Tanzania, in the Selous Game Reserve. That of all the prides that I got to know, there was only the one pride that would regularly spend time in trees, and they weren't just small trees, they were big marulas. I've got photographs of one lioness easily 20 feet up in a marula tree, like a leopard, sprawled out on a branch. And then in Lake Manyara in northern Tanzania, Lake Manyara is known for its tree climbing lions, because somehow there the lions tend to spend a lot of time in trees too. I have seen lion in trees in the Ruaha National Park in Tanzania, but not sleeping like leopards. I've also seen lions falling out of trees, because they're not the greatest of climbers. But I don't think any of our local cats have taken to sleeping in trees yet. You often find in places where they do sleep in trees, you'll find that there is a high number of biting flies lower to the ground, especially the tsetse flies, and they tend to try and get out of the way of tsetse flies. So just a quick stop. I want to stop mostly because it's that time of the evening when we have some of the most amazing sounds in the bushveld. You heard how quiet it was earlier on our drive when it was still hot. There were barely any bird calls. I just want to be quiet so we can listen to some of the closing sounds of the day. And it's this moment that everything chooses to be quiet. Okay, let's move along. Regina wants to know if there are weaver birds in the area. And Regina, yes, the only weaver bird really that is quite busy is the red-billed buffalo weaver. And there's a bunch of red-billed buffalo weaver nests across the dam in the Torchwood. But all the other weavers are only mostly busy around the summer months. So we might see some of the weavers, but they won't be nesting now. It is so pretty. Such a beautiful still evening, and the sky is just getting better and better, so we should be turning around and heading into the sunset. Weavers tend to be more active in the summer months when they're nesting and breeding. Those that weave the baskets. Fire in the sky is getting better every moment. Might get a bit of a signal drop going through this dip because it is quite a deep dip. Just in case we do, just don't go anywhere. It's just a little signal glitch. They've adapted to over millennia. That's what buffalo do. But just to clear something up, Vivian, these are African buffalo. We don't really call these water buffalo. Water buffalo are the Asian buffalo up, going into India and Asia. I know it would seem that these are water buffalo because lately, especially with the drier conditions, the hot dry conditions that we have, we're mostly only seeing buffalo lying in the water. So I can understand why they would be called water buffalo. But we don't consider African buffalo the water buffalo. For us it's either Cape buffalo or the African buffalo. The other buffalo we do get are the forest buffalo in Central Africa, Central West Africa. Much smaller species of buffalo. Much like the Asian elephant, the Asian buffalo have been domesticated, and much like the African counterparts, the African buffalo have not been domesticated, although they have become big business. You see, all the buffalo here in the Kruger National Park carry certain diseases. They're not always affected by those diseases, but they certainly carry them, and those diseases can be a threat to not only other animals, but especially domestic stock with these buffalo to get out. So these are diseases that came in with cattle hundreds of years ago when man first brought cattle this way. And so there's a very big trend, or a very big effort now to breed disease-free buffalo. But they're very limited in what areas they can go to. You can't put disease-free buffalo back into Kruger. They just come into contact with diseased buffalo. Tuberculosis, bovine tuberculosis is one of them. Foot and mouth or hoof and mouth disease. Foot and mouth disease is another. I believe there's something called corridors disease. I would imagine there were one or two others, a couple of other pathogens found in African buffalo that keep them contained to the Greater Kruger National Park area. Oh, lion tracks. Well, not very fresh lion tracks. These are probably when these kahumas came out from Djuma, because the Gowrie Dam is not far from us, it's just a little bit south of us. And they have found these lions just north of us, so it's very dark, unfortunately, a little bit too dark to see. But maybe I can turn a little bit to show you the size of these tracks. You see, we need the light of the late afternoon reflecting in the back of the track for us to go.
Not so bad.
It is quite nice. Leave it up to Brian to get it. Wanted to sneeze and I couldn't. Well, the sun must have pretty much set now, because all of the colour in the high part of the sky above us is gone. We should have, if it weren't for the cloud, we should have the first quarter moon directly above us, right next to Jupiter. In fact, today, and I hope we can see it later, maybe in Fireside Chat, I'll get the camera person to point the camera up at the sky, see if we can see. Because also, if the Fireside Chat might be a little bit lower down. At the moment it's directly above us, being first quarter, or thereabouts. But as far as I know, it's going to be right. What was that? Something big just crossed the road way up ahead. and there isn't another one. Anything I can do is try and get there. It's quite far, way up the road. So yes, the Moon and Jupiter right next to each other today. Lois is saying, looking at the clouds, there might be rain tonight. Lois is in Buffalo. I don't think so, Lois. But it has moved north. It's all moving north. If we were going to have rain tonight, it would be coming from the southeast. It's not impossible for the storm to swing around from the north, but it's mostly, by the looks of things, mostly rained out already. That is rain cloud, Lois, you're quite correct. It's just not happening here. In fact, I can see, earlier on when we stopped, I could actually see the rain coming out of the cloud far to the west. It's getting a bit dark. There was something, I think, across the road somewhere near here. But it might have been a buffalo. Catherine wants to know if we have brown recluse spiders. Suppose, Catherine, the equivalent thereof, yes. Similar. Why don't you send me the scientific name? Could it be a Latrodectus geometricus? If it is Latrodectus geometricus, then it would be the same as our brown button spider, as opposed to Latrodectus mactans, which I think is our black widow, black button spider. You see, it's very hard to comment or very hard to answer a question about a common name of something. And I know I was going on about water buffalo and African or Cape buffalo, and it's kind of semantics when it comes to things like that, because common names don't really mean much. We can call something the same thing, but it might be a completely different animal or flower or plant or bird, because the common name is just that, it's a common name. But in zoological or botanical terms, everything has two, well, apart from its family name and everything else, it has two main names, the genus name and the species name. What we call binomial nomenclature, which basically it's like a name and a surname, except the surname comes first. In a way, to show that they're related. And I know that we don't have any spiders we call a brown recluse, but I do know that there are spiders that are called different things that are actually the same spiders that we get here. And that's the scientific name, because that allows me to answer the question a little bit better. Seems there were giraffe on this road after all today. All heading west. Okay, Loxosceles reclusa is the brown recluse. Thank you for the answer to that. So it is the same type of spider as our brown widow spider, but it is obviously a species we don't get here in Africa or South Africa. Loxosceles reclusa, I believe. is what it is, as opposed to our Loxosceles species, the two that we get. Of some medical importance, not as, oh, I'm talking about our brown, what we might call a brown recluse, our brown widow. Not as dangerous as the black widow, or venomous. But as the name suggests, they are reclusive spiders. They hide underneath things, behind things, in dark corners, and because they're a web-living, a web-dwelling spider, they don't really ever leave their web unless the web is disturbed. Now, it's not the kind of web that we see with the golden orbs and some of the webs we see here, the very typical orb web. These are not orb web spinners, the Loxosceles. They spin a very untidy web. They've got quite a strong silk too, but they also have like a reclusive, like a funnel. They're not funnel, well, I guess the funnel web is a different spider. We won't go there, that's Australia, Sydney. But they do have almost like a retreat, a silk retreat where they go to hide, where they live, and they come out from that retreat when they need to catch insects that get caught in their rather messy silky web. And they have quite a fast-acting venom. And you'll often find several egg cases in their webs. And one of the easiest ways to tell the difference, if you don't see the spider, if you can tell the difference between the brown and the black here in Africa, the black widow versus the brown widow, or the black button spider versus the brown button spider. The brown button spider has got spikes all over the egg case, and for the black button spider, the egg case is very smooth. Very distinct difference between the two, and you'll often find more than one egg case, and that is because they will spin a couple of false egg cases and hide their eggs, their true eggs. They'll hide in one of them to try and throw off the parasitic wasps and some of the other parasitic insects and things that are likely to feed on the eggs or the spiderlings. Lovely time of the day right now. The daytime fading, nighttime starting to wake up and come alive. Hopefully we'll get to hear some sounds from our fireside chat. We might even get some visitors from our fireside chat, which should be happening in a few minutes. But from 6 o'clock our time on the hour, in a few minutes time, we'll say goodnight for a brief moment, and then we'll see you when we start up again at the fireside. It's going to take me a few minutes to get the vehicle and the guys have already made the fire. They're setting up the lights, they're setting up all of the equipment already, so it's not much of a delay. It's just getting the vehicle in so that we can use this camera and broadcast from this camera, hooking up the microphone and the earpiece. Now, looking for animals at night, if you're looking for the reflection of animals' eyes, it's not easy to see animals themselves, especially some of the smaller nocturnal animals that might be out here tonight. And the key is to actually try and find the light reflecting in their eyes. wonderful adaptation that they have that we don't have. Being able to see at night, having these eyes that reflect almost twice the amount of light onto the retina. Now, before we start heading back towards quarantine and the fire, I thought with this afterglow of this really spectacular sunset that we have, there's one place that we can really view it nicely just before we head back to the fire. It's going to be here on Sandy Patch open area. Just a very quick glimpse, and then we need to be getting close by the time we close up the drive. But there is, in one go, unblocked by the I can see the moon behind the cloud, but I'm not seeing Jupiter just yet. I think that's Sirius straight up above us and Venus lower down, which means that Jupiter is just hidden by the cloud. Beth firing. I can see the moon behind the cloud, but I'm not seeing Jupiter just yet. I think that's Sirius straight up above us and Venus lower down, which means that Jupiter is just hidden by the cloud. Villages and smallish towns outside the national park. Villages and smallish towns outside the national park. And fortunately for because it's all set up, it's just a matter of plugging things in on the vehicle. To let a vehicle go past. Staff coming in. My name is Mark. Andrew's been on camera this afternoon.
Brian has been on camera.
Why did I say done it twice today, Brian?
No.
Because I'm thinking of too many other things. My apologies. I don't know if I'll ever get live this one down. Brian has been on camera. Brian with a Y. Not an A. For Andrew. Nikki in final control. We will be seeing you shortly after these highlights that we'll show you. And when you see us again, we will be in situ at our fire, around the fire, chatting about some interesting things we've seen this week. So do join us, do send in questions, and I'll see you shortly.